Hey everybody, this is Brett with the Indie Comic Dispatch. Welcome to a broadcast from the Dispatch. Hey everybody, it's
What's
Brett.
going on? It's
Hi,
Tyr.
You doing tonight?
Doing pretty good, Brett. How about you?
I'm well. I am excited for tonight's show. A horror night. I've been looking forward to this for a while. How about you?
Same. I'm a huge horror fan, so I've been ready for this.
I think I told you one time, and I think in our preview episode, maybe it was that I when I was little, I was a huge horror fan. Poltergeist and all that good stuff.
Yep.
And then I watched The Ring. And then I was like, I don't know that I'm a horror fan anymore. And then I watched The Grudge, and I thought, nope, I'm not a horror fan anymore. And I've only recently come back to horror via comic books, and so I'm excited.
Yeah, it's the same for me because in the same vein as for me too. I grew up, I watched It, Puppet Master. Hellraiser was one of my favorites as a kid. Like, a kid probably shouldn't be watching Hellraiser, especially the first one.
Yeah,
I loved Hellraiser. Of course, Freddy Krueger. Nightmare on Elm Street. Friday the 13th. Man,
I watched a lot of that with my uncle. I had this one uncle who was probably a horrible uncle in retrospect, but as a kid, he was fucking amazing. And showed me like Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street and all that stuff.
It's funny because my uncle is the one who introduced me to Hellraiser.
Really? Maybe we're cousins.
Oh, probably are.
Yeah. Oh, well, you ready to introduce our guests?
Oh yeah, let's get going.
All right. Well, our first guest is a writer. He's not a comic book writer, but he's a writer and a huge comic book fan. Lawrence Everett is the author of Ghostly Legends and Creatures of the Weird and Strange fun book. I'm probably saying, and co-author of Tales of the Weird and Strange. He's been a comic collector since the 1970s and has one of the coolest comic book rooms I've ever seen. Lawrence, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. You're way too generous.
No,
it's not that cool of a comic.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, there.
Look at it behind him, everybody. It's cool comic book room.
It's a comic cave.
Yeah.
You've been watching me a little bit, evidently, to know about all that.
Yep.
Man, that's insane.
Our next guest is Brian Hawkins. He's an editor of Mad Cave Studios and writer for Black Box Comics. He has Devil's Dominion, an action horror series releasing in stores in December, and is self-publishing a horror comic with co-creator and artist Richard Kemp titled Don't Ever Blink. Chapter 2 is launching on Kickstarter next week. Brian, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me. And again, you guys are too kind with the intros. And that room is awesome.
I know, right?
Isn't it?
That is crazy.
And you guys are...
Yeah. Cool.
All right. Our next guest is Harry Nordlinger. I hope I'm saying that right, Harry. You can correct me in a second once I welcome you to the stream. He's a cartoonist and publisher responsible for the horror anthology Vacuum Decay, which is just amazing. I got issue 1, and it's a fantastic horror anthology, and I'm a big fan of anthologies. Issue 2 just came out literally today. Go to his website and get it. Welcome, Harry. Oh, you there?
Hey, Harry.
Oh, no. Okay, let's try again.
He's back. There he is.
There we go.
Sorry.
There he is.
Boom.
No, you're
Sorry,
good.
my internet's not the best. Thank you so much. I didn't hear how you introed me because it was buffering on my end. But I really appreciate you guys having me, and I'm stoked to be here.
We didn't say anything offensive about you at all. Don't worry.
Oh, okay. I just an hour ago put out Vacuum Decay issue 2, my newest horror comic. literally did the release an hour ago before this. So
I was saying you did miss it.
That is too cool.
You did miss it. That I said Vacuum Decay 1 was phenomenal, and I loved it. And
thank
I
you
think
very
everybody
much.
should
Thank you
go
very
get
much.
issue 2. Our next guest is Ryan Tavares, writer and artist, co-creator of Tales of Death and Destiny horror anthology, creator of Nomads, which is currently live on Kickstarter and almost 200% funded, or perhaps more by this point. Nomads is a fantastic series so far, and if you haven't read it, you need to. Welcome, Ryan.
Howdy. Hello. Thanks for having me.
Ryan?
No problem.
How you doing?
John, you're another one that I should have figured out how to say your last name correctly, perhaps, other than just the way I say it in my brain. But John Kalunga, and please correct me on that, because I know that's probably not right. As a writer living in Arizona, he's the writer and creator of Bleen, the graphic novel published by Caliber Comics, a fan of 80s horror films of all sorts. Yeah, John. And yes, he's the stranger, and yes, he's heard of Stranger Things, and yes, he really loves it, maybe a little too much. John, welcome.
We have a million
How you doing? It's all right. I'm used to people not being able to say my name.
How do you say it?
It's Kalunga.
Kalunga. See, every time somebody says it, I'm like, duh, Brett, that was dumb. You should have known that.
Yeah, it's fine.
Well, welcome everybody. This is our we've had one panel conversation that was about this large, but last week was a much smaller conversation. So we're just gonna dodge around. We'll ask Tyr and I will ask questions. Feel free to jump in and answer. Feel free to ask each other questions. Go ahead and tell us a little bit more about each of your books. Lawrence, we'll start with you and go kind of down and around.
Well, I guess my book was inspired by the old pulp magazines from the 40s and 50s. And I'm not real sure. I was just kind of always a horror fan, but I based this on like local legends of everybody that participated in it. So it's kind of a semi-horror, I'm not quite sure, ghostly type thing. It's pretty cool, and that stuff's always fascinated me. So writing about it in a different way that it actually happened was my biggest I guess pleasure in doing that kind of stuff. You guys impress me. You're all doing comic books. I can draw, and I attempt to write, but I don't think I could ever do a comic book.
I love your book when I saw it. I haven't bought it yet. I haven't ordered one, but it reminds me of the type of books that we used to camp a lot as a kid. And your book reminds me of the type of book that I would see in like the campground store just to scare the shit out of kids that were camping the weekend.
That's exactly what it is.
Cool.
Yes. I just want to shout out Jeffrey Johnson for a moment. He said The Ring ruined me for years. Thank you, Jeffrey. I'm not the only one. Let's go down from Lawrence. Brian, tell us about
The Ring.
Tell us about Don't Ever Blink first, because that's hitting Kickstarter next week. You said, I think.
Yeah. So we're playing with the dates. It should be late next week or possibly on my birthday, November 9th. We're making sure that all of issue 1 is out to all of the backers first. It's in print now and should be shipping. So we definitely want to deliver on that first. So within the next week or so.
Awesome.
So Don't Ever Blink is about a killer who sews the eyelids of its victims. And you have one heroine survivor, Tinsley Marissa Grace is her full name. And she survives this harrowing attack. And basically she wants to know how and why. And so it's a 5-issue limited series that I'm doing with my co-creator, Richard Kemp. And where we're looking at, who is the serial killer and how did she survive? And there's a lot of backstory to who the serial killer is and who the killer was before this even happened. So it's chock full of backstory.
That's awesome. Carrie, tell us about Vacuum Decay issue 2 in the silhouetteness of your room. Was that a mood choice?
I just No, that's unfortunate. It's just the way my windows are laid out. It makes the lights change. I just put out Vacuum Decay issue 2. It is part of my horror anthology featuring existential terror tales by some fantastic indie cartoonists, myself included. It's got a cover by my buddy Carmichael Jones. My big inspiration for this was a lot of, like, obviously Tales from the Crypt, EC horror, Vault of Horror. That stuff has always been a big part of my life. But more specifically, the 70s and 80s underground horror comics, stuff like Slow Death and Insect Fear. Those books are huge favorites of mine. And also that's local to me in San Francisco. It's kind of like a local legacy here. So that inspired me to want to do my own take on the modern horror anthology, but also give it a little bit more of like a surreal existential twist, make it a little bit more like David Lynch and a little bit less overt with the scares. Although there is plenty of gore in here as well. And I just put that out. You can read it for free on vacuumdecay.com, or you can grab a physical copy from there.
Nice.
Well, as soon as this broadcast is over, everybody, don't leave the broadcast, stay around. But as soon as the broadcast is over, go read it for free. I had no idea it was for free. That's awesome. Suzanne Duncan, it looks like, says, hello, John Kalunga.
Yeah, it's all on the website.
Very cool.
Oh, that's my
Ryan.
mom.
Nice.
Too awesome. That's too awesome.
Thank you, guys.
Ryan, let's talk about, tell us a little bit about Nomads, and then tell us about your horror book too, because we got to plug the Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I got a Kickstarter going on right now for my series Nomads. I'm the writer, artist, colorist, anchor, everything on that book. And we're about 200% funded, just a couple $100 away from unlocking some stretch goals. Nomads is a post-apocalyptic story following a character named Hawk as he searches for his tribe who has gone missing. It's kind of a different take on post-apocalyptic genre. Instead of kind of leaning into like the cyberpunk or Mad Max elements, we return to the primal. So there's all sorts of fantastic beasts and other tribes and remaining humans around, and with a little bit of kind of like Terminator elements in there. I'm releasing, it's volume 1, so it's collecting the first 4 books. And you can see more of that on my website, tavaresart.com, or you can find it on Kickstarter, Nomads Volume 1. And so before that, we did, my friends and I from our studio Attack of the Rivals, we did a short horror anthology, Tales of Death and Destiny. And it's kind of similar to everyone else, just taking a stab at that whole sort of Tales from the Crypt, EC Comics sort of thing, but with our own spin on it, our own take. We're looking to expand that a little bit. We didn't release one this year because I was literally launching the Kickstarter for Nomads, during October. But we are definitely putting some stuff together for next year, so keep an eye out for that. You can also see that on my website, tavaresart.com.
Very cool. John, tell us about Bleen.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah. Okay. Just making sure. Bleen is about a teenage girl who gets committed to an asylum, who basically believes that she has these like imaginary monsters kind of like haunting her in her life and all that. And the asylum has some very like bad people kind of working there. And so it kind of becomes like a story of like her versus the bad people working there, and if the monsters are real or not, and all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty creepy.
Cool. And that is available through Caliber. Am I remembering that right? Caliber Comics. Yep. Very cool. So, what's everybody's? Let's just go around and talk about everybody's introduction to horror. I was telling Tyrone, I remember my parents said like when I was like 3 or 4, I would watch Poltergeist basically on repeat. And again, go ahead and question my parents' parenting ability. That's fine because they were letting like a 3-4-year-old watch Poltergeist. So, in no particular order, if you, Brian, if you remember what your introduction to horror was, go for it.
Well, for me myself, like I said earlier when I was talking to you, for me diving into horror, it was things like Puppet Master and stuff like that. So like all of the old horrors, so like Puppet Master, Mommy Dearest. There was another one, I can't quite remember the name of it, but it was similar to Puppet Master, but it was dealing with like, I guess, these dolls that were in a house that came alive, and that came out, I think, in the early 80s. Can't think of the name of it, but it, of course, anything Stephen King, like I like growing up, like I was in elementary school reading, like in 5th grade, reading Firestarter and stuff like that, and watching The Stand and V and just sci-fi and horror, like all of that stuff. Just I've always been into it, but my all-time favorite, I would say, for me, is Hellraiser. Freaking love Pinhead. Like he's the villain, the horror villain of all villains.
Yeah,
but,
yeah, mine too.
Yeah, so,
oh wow. Oh, well, I'm gonna be a little cliche, and I'm gonna go with Nightmare on Elm Street 4. I remember it vividly. I was just really embracing horror. I had an older friend who was like 2 or 3 years older than me. Summer, like during the summer, he would come down to New Jersey, from New Jersey. I'm based in Virginia, and so he was really into like Nightmare on Elm Street and Freddy Krueger. So I all of a sudden like really hyped on it. Huh? And so I got really hyped on it.
You guys hear me?
We went to go see.
Yeah, we can hear you.
4. And I had.
Okay, sorry. I think my internet's really crapping out. I apologize.
No, you're fine.
When I was a little kid.
That's fine.
hold on, real quick.
Hold on, Harry. Brian was going.
Okay.
Hold on.
Oh, sorry. I can't hear. I'm so sorry.
No, you're good, man. You're good.
It's all right. It's all right. Go ahead,
We're
Brian.
paper, rock, and scissors. 1, 2, 3. Okay.
No. Go ahead, man. I'm fine.
Okay, I won. So we went to go see Nightmare on Elm Street 4, and I was hyped. I had the claw glove and everything. I was ready for Freddy Krueger. Like he had became this icon for me. I'm like, yeah, let's go. And my dad had to like escort me out. It was too much for me. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's who Freddy is. No, I don't want any parts of this. And so I was gone.
Was 4 Dream Masters? Was that 4? That wasn't 4, was it? Was it Dream
I think
Masters?
that was Dream Masters. It was the one where he I remember, and I watched it like twice since then, but it was all in my childhood and then when I was a teenager. He was lifting weights. He was helping someone lift weights. And as the guy was lifting weights, he pressed down and his elbow was broke. And the guy like turned into like an insect or something.
Turned into a cockroach. I know what you're talking about because he squished him in the roach motel.
I was done. And so I ran out. But that moment stuck with me. It didn't turn me against horror. It just took me a minute to really embrace everything that was going on with Freddy. I wasn't prepared. I just wasn't prepared.
No.
Yeah.
All right, Harry, feel free to plug in.
All right. Sorry, guys. I apologize. When I was a kid, I was like really scared. Like I would have like nightmares and I couldn't sleep a lot, but I was always into horror, but I just was too scared of it. So I'd go to Blockbuster a lot to rent movies, and I would go to the horror section and look at the backs of all the books or the backs of the VHS cases, and look at the covers. And that was like the closest I could get to real horror because I was too scared of it. And then I would get scared from looking at the back. So really great. But then by the time I was like 10, 11, something clicked where it was the opposite. And all of a sudden, like horror was all I was into. And I think it started when I saw, weirdly enough, the first Resident Evil movie, which in retrospect is not a good movie. But when I was 10 years old, it was the first horror movie I'd ever seen. And then from there, I picked up the classics like Texas Chainsaw, Shining, Pet Sematary. I remember scared me a lot when I was a kid. But if I had to say my favorites, it would probably be kind of cliche answers, but Texas Chainsaw, The Shining, and The Thing. I also really love this movie Possession, which is a really great Sam Neill Polish horror movie. It's one of my favorites.
Nice.
Okay.
Nice.
Looks like we lost Lawrence. Hopefully he'll be back on. I don't know if it's his signal or what, but we'll see. Dope Girls Comics on Instagram says Candyman was really scary to me. LOL.
Yes.
That shit was scary.
Just his line.
was
His line. I think he has probably one. Well, Jason, Tony Todd. He's just scary. He's a scary dude. Period. I think that's the reason why they made him do the voice of the one villain in Flash, because like he really took that to the next level. But like his line, I think he has probably one of the most iconic lines other than Pinhead, where it was like, I think he said like be my sacrifice. Like he was just telling her all the time, be my sacrifice, and you just get the shit. Like,
be my victim.
Yeah, and that too.
It's Candyman. It's all to it.
So two favorite horror, or we've talked a little bit about favorite horror and scariest horror. What introduced us to horror? Who's your favorite? This is a good transition here. Who's your favorite horror villain?
Pinhead.
Michael Myers. I'm very cliche, but Michael Myers.
He's a good one.
I'm a huge fan of Leatherface, man.
Leatherface.
Yeah, just something about when you first see him, and he just is he's fast. He's like explosive. That I just remember watching the first one, and that door opens up, and he hits the lady over the head with the sledgehammer, and just drags her away.
Yeah,
and just something about that was so shocking. It wasn't like slow dread. It was like he's coming running at you, full click, ready to cut you up.
I think with Leatherface, he was a little more unhinged than the other horror villains.
Yeah, totally. It wasn't like slow burn like Michael Myers or anything.
Yeah. What about you,
Lawrence? Lawrence, we're talking about favorite horror villain, and John's about to go with that. So just bringing you up to speed. I think John's audio is slightly delayed.
Is it my turn now?
Yeah, man.
What's your favorite horror villain?
Okay. All right. Sorry. Now I know what the Brady Bunch felt like. My favorite horror. My two favorites was probably Pinhead from Hellraiser, and also Jeepers Creepers. That guy was like really scary.
Yeah.
Just driving around in the.
Yes, that song still creeps me out. The blue eyes at the end. Holy shit! Yes.
I just love the idea of like a shapeshifter or someone who takes, because his thing was he was stealing people's body parts, right?
Yeah, he was like putting it on himself. I think to prolong his life and stuff like that. I think two other.
It's a really creepy concept.
Yeah, it
really
is. It really
concept.
It really is. Like the one part whenever
Part 2 threw me off a little bit.
Yeah, part 1 I think was the creepiest, because I know when we thought she was going to be the final girl, but when she saw her brother's tattoo, and she just like lost it right there. I was like, oh man, that's crazy. That's wild. Right? I think two unsung heroes. Because I know my favorite is Pinhead, so I'm not going to say it again because John already said it. But I think two unsung heroes. I think as far as villains, probably would be the Tall Man from Phantasm. And the Pilgrim from Poltergeist, because that's what his actual name is. The Pilgrim from because he I know he came in 2, and that's when he really started haunting Caroline. And then he went over to 3 and haunted her some more.
He was creepy as all get out.
Yeah,
he
was a creepy dude.
For me, the ambiance of Michael Myers, like when the music drops. And he's just standing there. And he has a certain like tilt. His whole demeanor is everything. It's like the cinematography of that is it just captures what horror is.
Yeah,
like that you are completely. Are we allowed to?
Oh yeah,
yes,
yeah.
I have several times. Yeah,
you are completely fucked.
Yeah, you are.
Like you're done from the music to the stance. To the white face.
Yeah, I give it this. He does have the most memorable music from any horror
for sure.
movie. I'm pretty sure he has the most memorable.
Good.
Yeah.
My middle school daughter for Halloween has been practicing the Halloween theme song. So like I'll walk into the kitchen, then all of a sudden here, I'm like.
See what I used to do is I used to do Jason's breathing. Every time I'm walking by somebody, that was my thing in high school, and everybody's like, "Just stop that!"
I love that. I actually have a college story that I mean, it can't get me in trouble now, but like my college roommate and I, we had the screen mask and we just wreaked havoc freshman year. Oh my goodness. It was crazy. Like we prank phone call, just run up and down the dorm. It was crazy.
Yeah.
So, what ultimately then inspired you to write a horror book or comic? Anybody go?
Well, for me, it's just been like a lot of us, like watching horror since I was a little kid. Like you, Brett, my mom let me watch some questionable shows.
Cool.
One that I loved was Tales from the Crypt. I just was obsessed with the Crypt Keeper. And just that puppet, I don't know. I just wanted to watch the segments with him. I didn't need a lot of the actual stories over my head, but I loved the idea of the narrator.
Cool.
And so part of that is, for me, is just a fascination with that from an early age, and wanting to kind of, tell my own versions of those kind of stories, and combining it with some of my other interests.
While we got Lawrence on, Lawrence, what ultimately inspired you to kind of take these folklore and write your own stories about them?
I guess I don't really have an answer for that. I guess I just always liked the horror and never really thought about it that way. I mean, it was just something. Well, like I said, I like the old pulps. I like the old horror comics, but I also I like the old Hammer horror movies. I don't know. I feel like I'm the oldest person in here. I don't know if you guys ever watched any of that stuff.
I know those. I've seen those.
And, I guess what really got me in was the old Frankenstein movies from back in the 70s. I mean, because that's what I was doing. That's when it was all good for me.
Mm-hmm.
And inspired to write about them. I guess I'm with the EC comic band too. I mean, those was always the coolest things. And, I have a bunch of the originals. So, I mean, you almost got to kind of look at that for any kind of inspiration.
I
totally agree.
Cool.
I totally agree. Anybody else? What inspired you to write your own horror story or anthology, and who's loading a magazine full of bullets right now?
Not me. My AR-15's in the closet.
For me, it's going to be a little bit more philosophical, maybe. Like, I really look at horror as like it's really about the human condition. It really captures what it really is to be human. From the emotional entanglements to the logical approaches to survival. And like when you're in the mix of a good horror, you get this humongous range of things happening inside of you, and it goes back to demonic dread, and where this sublime reverence of fear that really carries us throughout this life. Like we have a fear of something; it's instinctual, but then when you mix, the sentience that we have, we then try to figure out why do we fear these things. And I think that is what horror just captures so very well, and why it's such a driving force of storytelling.
I got one more thing to add to that. I think that the other thing that's cool about horror is you look at some of these, a lot of them, I mean, most of them are all low budget, and some of like my favorites are made by a small team, like Night of the Living Dead and Evil Dead, like all that stuff. Hearing those stories about those guys, in college or whatever, just getting a hold of a camera, getting their friends together, playing around with makeup and low budget effects and making a movie. It also relates just to making comics in general. I think comics is one of the easiest ways for us to make some sort of form of entertainment without having, a camera crew. And we can put together these full-on productions. And, just in the tradition of horror as well, we can still tell those things, those scary stories to each other without having to have a lot of resources.
I respect that.
What about you, John? I know you've been pretty quiet. What about you, John?
What inspired? I don't know. I mean, I guess everybody pretty much summed it up pretty good already. I mean, I do have a funny story. When I was a little kid, about 7 years old, my mom took me and my brothers to watch Beauty and the Beast, from the 1991, the Disney one, and I remember I was like really like bent out of shape about it because she told me that we're gonna go watch Beauty and the Beast, and I was like, oh, I don't want to watch that. It sounds like some movie for like girls or something like that. And then, but I ended up really liking it, and it kind of like, it's kind of dark, has like a very like Victorian Gothic kind of darkness to it and stuff. And I don't know, like I guess that I was always just kind of like drawn to that kind of stuff ever since watching that movie. So.
Wait.
Thanks, Mom.
Are you saying that Beauty and the Beast is what led you to horror? Amazing.
That's
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I mean,
I love that.
yeah, for real. That is definitely different. But I get what you're saying. There's a lot of horror movies or horror plays and stuff that have that Victorian feel to it. Phantom of the Opera, is one of them. So I mean.
Wow.
It
was also like movies like Ghostbusters and Gremlins and all that kind of stuff. They kind of like comedy satires of horror kind of movies, and because I like to mix that into what I write. If you've read Blean, you know that I do that. I kind of add a little bit of a comedy into it, and kind of corniness and all that kind of stuff. So
that's cool.
Yeah, because Scream does that too. I think it was probably one of the more recent ones that did the same thing where it took horror.
I'm glad you said that.
Added in that satire and the comedic stuff, and you'll get so tied up in the comedy that when the horror part happens, you're like, "Oh crap! Yeah, I am watching a horror movie. I forgot."
Yeah, it was so well done. I love it.
Yeah, it's an interesting combination. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I love Scream.
I'm gonna have to check out your comic. It sounds like it will be very interesting.
So Harry, you have 2 books. You have Vacuum Decay and Softer Than Sunshine. Both.
Oh yeah.
Both very different books. So what and I love that about them. I love that. So tell us what inspired you to get here.
He is
Can you hear me?
He's showing them.
Well, a lot of it was when I was like 13. My first horror comics were inspired by all the movies I was watching at the time and like the Stephen King books I was reading. So they were a little bit more like kind of basic, straight up horror stories. When I was like 13, I wrote a comic about a disease that makes people melt. So, that kind of stuff. And then when I was like 18, 19, I discovered Al Columbia, and that kind of changed my whole world. And it kind of introduced me to this like existential horror that I wasn't totally aware of before, similar to the movies of like David Lynch or stuff like that, where the horror is more in the surrealness and the concept than it is in just a straight up slasher chase. So that was the big inspiration for my recent slate of comics, where it's more like the horror of kind of everyday world, but magnified in a surreal way.
Cool.
And that's been my more recent inspiration, at least.
That's very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, dude.
Before we go on, I just want to give a shout out. This is kind of our mid-show time. If you're on Instagram, our feed for Instagram does run out after an hour. You got about 30 more minutes. You're safe right now, but you may want to switch over to Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. Also, the Indie Comics Dispatch is part of Head Nerds in Charge. Indie Comics Dispatch does not have its own Patreon, but Head Nerds in Charge does. If you want to help support the types of things that Head Nerds in Charge does, go over to their Patreon after the show and support. Also, we are proud to support, Indie Comics Dispatch is supporting the Black Indie Comics distribution, distro. There we go. BIC Distro for short, and we have a brief word from them.
BIC, we just wanted to bring the vibe of like an indie comic convention to the retailers.
For you out there right now, those of you who always are coming to conventions and saying, can you find your comics on the web? Well, now you can at bigdistro.com.
Like the creativity and the art and the writing is comparable to mainstream comics, and in some instances even superior.
Big Distro is a way of delivering Black indie comics directly to comic shops, and online you can send them to. So if you're interested in shop, tell them to check out bigdistro.com and see about maybe ordering some comics from there. They're a really cool organization.
That's cool.
All right, let's jump back into the conversation.
Cool. Well, I guess we can move on to another question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I guess we can move on to another question. I know. How do I want to word this? Like, I know we all kind of touched on it briefly as we were talking about our what influenced us to get into horror, but you know, the horror genre has so many subsects. Like, you know, you got psychological horror, you got slasher horror, you got Victorian horror, you got, you know, so many sci-fi and horror mix. You got so many different things. So, what would you say is your favorite subgenre of the horror genre? And John, we'll start with you.
Start with me.
Yep.
I like the whole kind of like kids versus monsters kind of thing. You know, like It from Stephen King or Stranger Things. You know,
Ernest, Scared Stupid.
Or does anybody remember that movie Monster Squad?
Yes, I love
yeah.
Monster Squad.
Yeah.
I just kicked Wolfman in the nads.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, you know, like kids versus monsters or whatever kind of subgenre. I really like that one, and that definitely comes out in the stuff that I write too. So
Okay. Well, Lawrence, what about you? Because I know you've been kind of I know your connection isn't that well, so you missed a couple of questions. So what about you? What would you say is your favorite subgenre of the horror genre?
You know, for this week and probably for the last few months, probably more the sci-fi thing.
Okay.
Just because there's so much I can, when I write stuff, that I can do with it that still makes it, I guess, suspenseful, and I'm not quite sure how to say it, but it just works for me.
Yeah.
And that's what I like to read too.
Cool.
And then, of course, you got your old conventional stuff like the Draculas, and the Monster Squad thing is like really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I was old when it came on, but that was really cool. I wish we'd had stuff like that when I was a kid. And the Ghostbusters, John. The Ghostbusters we had was an ape and two guys with derby hats running around in like a Model T Ford. It was a Saturday morning live sitcom show.
Yeah,
I remember that. I watched. Well, I remember the reruns of that.
Yeah, the reruns. Not this is what happened. This is what's coming on next week. I don't remember.
Age doesn't matter. Age doesn't matter. It just means you've been there and done that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
You've acquired an awesome comic room, is what it means.
Yeah, like
You see it right there.
Bunker.
yeah. My eyes still keep going over there. Like, oh man. But it's funny you say that, like the sci-fi horror. Like, I know Species. If anybody remembers that was a good one.
Yeah.
Of course, Alien. You know, Predator. Yeah. Well, The Fly. Prometheus. Yeah, The Fly.
The Thing.
Fly, the first one, it was very horrific. Sci-fi horror.
Yeah, that messed me up.
Yeah.
The one of the first
The one with Jeff Goldblum.
Yes.
One of the first horror films that really messed me up was Event Horizon with Sam Neill, that sci-fi horror.
Ooh, I love that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like I loved it, and it scared me to death all at the same time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, space in
Lawrence
itself is already
Fishburne.
scary.
Yeah, Lawrence Fishburne's
exactly.
in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a
He's just
weird
like, we're leaving.
because I'd love the guy from Jurassic Park, right? As a kid that came out when I was a kid. So when I saw Event Horizon, it was like taking one of my childhood heroes and seeing him in a whole different light. I was like, oh
right?
Yeah.
Holy shit, Sam Neill.
And just the whole premise of that movie, like,
Yeah.
you could take that whole premise and flip it. And since, you know, all of us are comic book enthusiasts or create comics, I could see a story like that being in a comic book with
100%.
heroes and making it, you know, heroes going through this horror theme because like what it was like this. I think the spaceship went to the edge of the universe.
Yeah, like through a black hole or
so
black hole or something.
Yeah, because that stuff it's already space is already scary. No one really knows what's out there. People
cosmic horror. That feeling that you are just insignificant.
Exactly.
It kind of reminds me of that game Dead Space, where it's like the premise of that being around this cosmic entity just drives you mad, fries your brain to the point where you don't know what's real and what's not, and it's making things like mutate and just the idea that you're helpless against this.
Event Horizon was conceptually like a horror version of Solaris. Have you guys read or seen Solaris?
Yeah, I love Solaris.
Yeah,
you're right.
So it's essentially like they took Solaris and they made it a horror movie where instead of Solaris creating your desires, Event Horizon creates your nightmares.
Yeah,
that's a very good point right there.
Yeah,
watch them back to back.
Yeah, good double feature.
Yeah, it would be. Like, here we're gonna watch something happy. Now we're gonna watch something not so happy.
Maybe the other way.
So you can go to sleep at night, cheer you up. So here's another question that I had, if you don't mind, Brett.
Yeah, go for it, man.
So, in the funness of horror, horror has its tropes. So I'll ask this: who's your favorite? And I hope this doesn't make me sound chauvinistic when I ask this. But who's your favorite final girl in comics? Because not in comics, but in horror. Because in every horror movie, there's always the one girl who makes it to the end. She outsmarts the villain. She makes it to the end where everyone else is slaughtered. So who is your favorite?
I have one.
Final girl? Go ahead.
I have one. Kirsty from Hellraiser.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Because she basically outsmarts Pinhead, and then after that, like they kind of have like this weird like I don't know, like romance going or something. I don't know if they call it that, but it's almost like he likes her. Yeah, he likes her because she's like so like she's not afraid,
Yeah, she's
yeah. And then she's in the first two movies, and then she isn't in the movies at all, and then she kind of comes back later.
Yeah.
And like I think it was in the 6th movie.
Yeah. That was Bloodlines.
And Bloodline, yeah.
Yeah, when she came back.
She basically becomes like his helper at that point. Like it's not even like it's not like her against him anymore. Like they actually become like a team, and so it's kind of like I don't know. I always thought she was cool.
She is.
Yeah.
She really is.
She's cool. I love Olivia Hussey from Black Christmas. Sorry. That's
Oh, I've not seen that one.
No.
Yeah, I don't know.
That just came out like last year,
Black
right?
Christmas?
Maybe.
No. That's the
okay.
remake. Black Christmas is from 1974, and it's the first ever slasher, 4 years before Halloween.
Black Christmas? Really?
Yeah, it's phenomenal. You guys should all watch it and see it. They've remade it twice.
Yeah,
there's been like
I've seen the remakes.
The original '70s one is like phenomenal.
How did I not know that was a remake? That's awesome.
Definitely.
Wow.
I know, Brian, you were ready for it. You were itching. Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, you good. You good, Harry.
I'm going with Sidney Prescott as being the Michael Jordan of this. If you look at Sidney Prescott, 1 through 4, you thought it was done in 3, but 1 through 4, she goes through some shit. I mean, personally, like her mom, her dad, like every relationship that she had was ripped apart, and she survives it all, even to the point of her relative in 4. I mean, I'm assuming there are no spoilers now. Like even to her relative in 4, ends up being the killer.
Yeah.
Sidney Prescott, hands down.
Yeah.
Good call.
Hands down.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say Ripley, Sigourney Weaver.
I was waiting for it.
Yeah, she's just so badass, man. And so by the time you get to 2, she's get away from her, you bitch. Like I love it. Just everything about it is so good. That transformation, the whole time she's like, "This is fucked up. Why is nobody listening to me?" And by the end of it, she's vindicated and she survives.
Yeah.
But
It kind of becomes one, I think.
she had to do something with that alien.
I definitely liked it. I definitely liked it when she was the gatekeeper. That's for sure.
Yeah.
What did she do with the alien though? In Alien 4, did she have like?
Well,
was there relations
she got cloned. She got
Clone, and they put a baby alien in her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, in
That's kinda-
3, well, in 3, she was quote unquote pregnant by the alien because remember when she
Right.
jumped off
She
into
got-
the lava, it burst out of her and she caught it.
Yeah.
So some type of way they found her, which I don't understand how they found her in lava unless they just had
Yeah.
her DNA
And they cloned her.
before that. Yeah, and they cloned
They
her.
cloned her with the
She
alien DNA
yeah,
out of lava.
exactly.
Yeah.
Clean DNA, so she could
Yeah.
talk or she could control the aliens.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then you had that
Yeah.
alien human hybrid, which that thing, it was freaky.
Super
It was
weird.
freaky.
Man.
It was freaky. Dope
Everything
Girl
about
Comics says Alice from Resident Evil.
Alice from Resident Evil. Oh, okay.
Yeah, she's cool.
She's too much of a superhero though.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Powers for sure.
I mean, I love the
enjoy it,
Resident
don't
Evil
get me
movies. I
wrong.
love for them for how bad they are. I mean, I just they're good, so good. They're so bad they're good, in my opinion.
Resident.
Yeah.
That's one
She
thing.
was better as Lily.
Yeah. Oh, any
What
other final
about-
girls?
Lori. I'm surprised no one said her.
Oh,
Lori?
from Halloween.
Yeah.
Halloween.
Yeah.
All of them fighting her brother off
Yeah.
Yeah.
toe to toe.
She would be my second.
Yeah.
Like she's
Yeah.
a like survivor. Like yeah.
I didn't mind the most recent one. Where she's like ancient survivor.
Yeah,
Her whole house is a trap.
Yeah.
Yeah,
she's
uh,
a survivor.
the way
Like,
She's a badass in that one.
Mhm.
Oh, I
Or Sarah
really like.
Connor. Sarah
Yep.
Connor.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. Wow,
Sarah
you read my
Connor.
mind.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then there's I'm gonna put her in here, even though she was a young girl, but Carol Ann. Like, and I don't know if
Yes.
I don't know if she's final girl because she obviously wasn't really fighting. Like, I'm not gonna say she
No.
wasn't fighting, but
No,
she was
but
fighting.
so sad
was-
she died. That actress died.
Yeah,
you
the
know
actress
that?
ended up it was
Yeah.
actually one of those instances where everyone says, you know how in horror movies and stuff like that, if
Yeah.
the
curse.
after a while the crew start dying and
Yeah.
it's cursed. So a lot of people felt
Yeah.
that Poltergeist got cursed because she
A
ended up
lot of
dying.
people
after
from
the
the
third
original
one.
Psycho died too.
Yeah, and she ended up dying after the third one, but yeah,
Just over time.
they wanted her. Those ghosts wanted her all the way to Poltergeist 3, and she
Mhm.
still managed to do away with them. This
Yeah.
young, I think in Poltergeist 3 she was like 12, 13 years old, but
Yeah,
they were
something like
chasing her
that.
since she was like 4 or 5 in the first one.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Like, can you imagine that? Like, that's crazy.
The freakiest part of the Poltergeist was the psychic woman. They go, Caroline.
Yeah,
God.
she was like my favorite one though, because she was always there when they
freaked me
needed her.
out every time.
She was always there when they needed her.
She was definitely bizarre.
Mhm.
Yeah.
This house
Rough
is clean.
Yeah.
This house is clean.
She's awesome though.
Man.
Oh,
good stuff.
so how is writing horror different than writing any other genre for you guys? Lawrence, how about you? You've mostly written horror and kind of the sci-fi creature stuff. So how is that different for you writing that, or is that just always where you fallen to?
That's just where I've always fallen to. It just always seemed to be what was right or whatever. It always, I guess, I hate to say it, it works. I've tried to write some adventure stuff, and it just kind of sucks. So I get totally disinterested.
What about some of the other guys?
It's to be an
How is-
alignment.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's been, we're freelancing some. I've bounced around with a lot of different ideas in comics. From action to fantasy, to sci-fi, and I really do just overall enjoy storytelling. With horror, I feel like I really get a chance to dive into more of a personal acquaintance with storytelling, where I really get to look at myself some through these different characters, and that definitely was the case for Devil's Dominion, where there's this female character and it's a supernatural story, but at the same time, I'm definitely infusing a lot of my pondering about the supernatural, about religion, about demons, and et cetera, into this character and her interactions with everything else. So for me, horror is a dive into self, more than anything else.
Love that.
Dig that. Dig that.
Right on.
I'd say for me, with horror, it's kind of like there's no limits. So when I'm working on different projects, personally, I like drawing, like gore and violence and action and all of that. And with horror, it's kind of like the chains are off, and I can just go as dark as I want to go, and do stuff as just weird and just eerie as I can go. I think the other thing too is I'm always, if I'm working on horror, it's thinking about like building that sense of dread. With the every page turn, building that dread. It's almost like when you're watching a movie and like the music is like at a high point, they got the strings going and you're just like, when is the jump going to come? And I really like trying to figure out how to capture that in a comic where you don't have something like sound or music to add to the ambiance.
I agree with that.
Susan on Instagram again says, "Love John's Leslie Grape and the Toy Maker. Haven't read his news story as of yet." Got anything to add to that?
Oh, that was actually the first book that I wrote like a very long time ago. I think it was like 15 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
It's when I first started, attempting to be creative and stuff like that. So it was kind of like a starting kind of project and stuff like that. And also, that's my mom, so she's always gonna like what I did when I was younger.
Nothing wrong with that.
Oh,
I love it.
My mom's one of my
number one.
A big supporter of mine
Mom's
too.
number one. I love it. That's
I dig that. I dig that.
I did 100%. That's cool.
What other thoughts do you guys have about
But
how
as far as,
writing horror
writing
is
for
different?
horror?
Yeah. Go ahead, John.
Well, actually, for the artwork aspect of comics, you have to put a lot of emphasis. Well, they do it in the movies too, but more so in comics, horror comics. You have to put a lot of emphasis in the facial expressions. The illustrator for Blaine, Landon Huber, he's really good at doing that. Like making these really weird looking faces and stuff like that. For those who have read it, they know a lot of real creepy looking faces and stuff in there. So I think that kind of brings it out more. It gets the reader more engaged with the comic. Because if everyone just had like a blank face, or it would be hard to get into it as far as like the horror aspect.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. It goes back to that human condition. I mean, it's whether we realize it or not. When storytelling, especially in this genre, we're looking at ourselves. We want to see something of ourselves or someone that we know. It's an interaction with humans, and seeing that expression is very, very, very important. I totally agree with that. Good stuff, man. Good stuff. Yeah.
You got it.
Lawrence,
Mic drop.
Lawrence, how do you write in the suspense? They're talking about building the suspense, building the scares through facial expressions and stuff like that. How do you write in the suspense in book form?
Wow. This is really horrible because it's almost like I just work my way to it, and you almost like I picture myself as a reader. What's going to happen, just like an old cheesy horror movie. What's going to happen, and that's kind of how I do it. I don't know if I'm answering your question right. Because
There's no right way. That's the beauty of this.
Would you say
This
it's
is all about?
natural? Would you say it's more of like a natural thing for you, Lawrence, where you just kind of intuitively know?
evidently, because some of the things that I've done in it's the real life experiences, not so much the horror, but just you just kind of add it all together, and it just like it comes. That's the way it rolls, and when it rolls, I just run with it, and hopefully people like it. But I always compare it to an old cheesy '70s horror movie. I mean,
Are some of the best.
Yeah, they have their things.
True.
They have their things about them.
and I mean, you look at what's going to happen. It's coming. I mean, you just got to lead your way to it, and that's what I try to do. And sometimes it don't work like you want it to, but you hope for the best. I'm sure you've all run into that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
All right.
Good stuff.
Here, you got any follow up?
Oh man, I think they answered that because I was wondering about that too. Like, how would you? Because like in horror movies and stuff like that, sometimes when the jump scare is coming, just like Lawrence was saying. Sometimes it's there. Like you'll see it, it's there. And I know for all of us being writers, we always see it. That's the reason why I can't really write. I can't really see certain movies now because I'll look at them like, oh yeah, this is gonna happen, and then it happens. But so like in comics, do you find it harder? Because like in comics, in the comic book base, you're literally looking at 2 pages and all your panels and stuff like that. So some people eyes might avert and jump to the next page or the panel that they aren't supposed to see yet. So how do you go about that as far as the comic part to keep that interest to where when they get to that scare or that horrific part, they're like, oh crap, or is it just like Lawrence was saying, you just that some people know that it's coming and you just write through it and keep going? Like how do y'all work with that as far as comics?
You save it for the page turn.
Exactly. But I would say one thing: when it actually happens and you don't expect it, that's the good one.
Yeah,
that's the one you wait for. The one that scares the shit out of you and you don't see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all about knowing what you want your panel to represent and display, and the pacing of your story. It's found in the scripting of your panels. And what Ryan was saying. You have the page turns, of course. When you turn, boom, you have a splash page, or you have this larger panel, or you have a reveal. But the buildup can happen, on that odd page if you're in a print book where that even page where it's on the left hand side and you're reading and you're flowing, and what's your numbering? Why is there 3 panels on this left hand side? Is it because you want the reader's eyes to go bam, 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 and then shift, and you have 5 panels here, then you flip over to the next, and boom, it's a splash. So in constructing the panels, it's all about speed of the reader, and it's a game that you're playing, trying to figure out, how do I tamper with the speed of the reader in order for them to understand the build-up to get this big reveal here. So it really is a craft to how you construct that, very much like how a director, would shoot his or her film. Like, how are you, what are your shots building up to? So it's quite a cool process.
Sounds like it.
I will say our Instagram video is ending or has ended, and so if you were still watching on that platform, switch on over to another platform. The water's fine over here.
Yep.
Yeah, I would just add to what Brian is saying is that the number of panels on a page can determine pace. The gaps between panels, those gutters can increase time. And so just learning how to manipulate that is one of the most powerful things that we can do, at least as illustrators, to control that sense of tension. Thinking about how long someone lingers on a page or a panel, depending on how much detail is in it. So the the less detail you have, sometimes the faster someone will move through something. So as something is increasing, or as the heart rate is increasing, you're moving faster through the panels, and then you get to that page turn, and you have your jump scare or whatever your reveal is.
That's very interesting.
What's that story in your anthology with is it a hunter and lions?
Oh yeah, the Woodwode. Yes, that was written by my buddy Stephen Kurbitz and drawn by myself. And there's definitely that whole thing is about the building of tension, and it throughout the background there's this creature that's hunting the hunter, and the hunter is out in the Sahara and he's poaching a lion, and as he's going about his hunt, slowly this spirit of the Sahara is coming to life to enact its justice on him. And
it's creepy as shit. I mean, it's fantastic. It's the way it's drawn. Everything you were saying reminded me of that particular story as you were talking. So
that sounds cool.
Yeah.
I'm gonna need some links.
Exactly.
All over.
Yeah, drop them in that IG group, because I do want to check out y'all's books. I really do.
All right.
For sure.
I'm actually like I love horror, and I know I've talked to Brett about it, and I actually kind of kick myself because I have a book that I'm starting that's going to be in my universe. It's called The Hellfighter. It's going to be it's pretty much about a World War I hellfighter in France. Pretty much died on the battlefield, came back to life, but with him coming back to life, he's able to see through that veil, so you can see demons, ghosts, and all these other different things and stuff like that. So, but I more likely want to, since I am a huge Hellraiser fan, and of course I love like the ancient monsters like vampires, werewolves, things of that sort. I want to try to play like almost like I don't want to say League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, because a lot of some people like it, some people don't. I didn't have a problem with it, but I would say probably like more of a Hellraiser meets the old monsters, like the Frankensteins and the werewolves and the vampires and stuff like that. And I kind of want to do something like that with it. So talking with you all and picking your brain and just hearing what you do is honestly, it's for me, it's motivating. Like I told Brett, I kick myself all the time because I'm like, man, I should have had my book out for Halloween. I'm like, nah, next year. We'll wait till next year. So I'm gonna be working on this too. So if I reach out to one of y'all, I'm like, hey, how did you do this again? Because I've been writing superhero and sci-fi comics for a bit. So, but I need to jump back to horror things.
You have to be a little twisted, dude.
Yeah. I feel you, because like I know my first story I ever wrote, I was in first grade. And of course, another one I forgot to mention when we were talking about Invasion of the Body Snatchers is another one of those horror sci-fi nights process. And one of my first stories that I wrote was very Invasion of the Body Snatchers-ish. And I think I got in trouble with my teacher because like the young boy found his mother in his toy chest. So, so she was like, what? She went to my mom, she was like, what is your son writing? My mom just looked at me, I'm like,
excuse me, ma'am, do you know what your son is writing?
Exactly, so like he found his mom in the toy chest, and that's one thing I remember because like my mom will bring it up every once in a while. She's like, yeah, you remember that story you wrote about the little boy found his mom in the toy chest?
This is not acceptable.
So speaking of links and stuff like that, let's go around one more time and say one really unique thing about your particular horror project and where people can get it. And as you talk, I'm going to try to scroll through some of your cover images. I probably won't have them in the right order just because of the way things work, but hey, they'll be up there regardless. So go, somebody pick. Let's start with Ryan. Ryan, you go ahead first and tell us about you again. Just a real quick blurb. What's unique about your particular horror project, and where can people grab it?
Okay, so Tales of Death and Destiny. I think what's unique about it is just the realms that we're exploring with it. So combining fantasy and, at least in our first edition, combining fantasy, a little bit of cosmic horror, and just kind of putting our own spin on it. Something that we want to do is really focus in and develop the narrator. So for the next volume, we want to have our narrators of Death and Destiny and how they interact. And the way that we're going with it is kind of like a Penn and Teller sort of thing, to add a little bit of comic relief and and kind of expand that and explore different genres. Something we talked about doing for the next book is doing all the stories revolving around a certain place or a certain time and how they interconnect and how those two characters, death and destiny, play off of each other. And again, you can find that at my website, tavaresart.com, and it's on the main page of comics, Tales of Death and Destiny. You follow that, and you can order the book.
Very good. John, let's have you go next.
The story is called Bleen, the graphic novel. It was published by Caliber Comics. You could get it at calibercomics.com. You could also find it on amazon.com as the Kindle version. They have a paperback version. And yeah, that's pretty much where you could find it. What makes it unique is just, I would have to say probably the nuances. It's very, very, metaphorical, and, there's a lot of cussing in it, and, but only from certain characters, kind of like, and funny enough, the main villain, the main antagonist of the story, never cusses one time in the entire story. So
that's interesting.
But yeah, I mean,
message.
It's basically like for me personally, what I think made it work, because when I was writing it and developing it and stuff, there was something that was missing from it in my mind, like a certain dynamic, and I created this. The last character I created was this old creepy man named Victor, who basically is like a food caterer, and once I created him, it kind of like really tied the whole story together, just kind of like the feeling of it. So that's actually an interesting piece of trivia, that he was the last character that I created, even though he's in the story probably more than anyone else besides Bleen. He was actually the last character I made, and he kind of made the creepy factor kind of go from 8 to 10, and so yeah, it's unique, and it kind of makes the reader think a lot about what would I do if I was in Bleen's position. Her name is Bleen because it's short for Oblina, so
Okay.
in case anyone was wondering.
I was.
And yeah. It's like, what the heck kind of name is that? So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all. So,
very cool. And that's available through Caliber Comics.
And that cover's intense, man. She looks like she hasn't slept in days.
Yeah, that character in the back is he's called the Long Phantom. And that's the main monster that kind of lives in her room and talks to her and stuff like that.
Oh wow.
And it's really creepy. Like he's like his head is like a burlap sack full of like rotten bananas.
Oh,
okay. You got to read it to know, like, what I'm talking about.
Check it out for sure.
Yeah.
And Landon's artwork throughout it all is amazing. It's very, very.
Oh yeah, he did a really good job on the artwork, and so yeah.
That's dope.
All right, Lawrence.
Oh, I was hoping you'd put the other one up.
Oh no.
Because that's the one I'm most. It's the most original.
All right. Give me a second, and I can probably get up. Talk about the other one for a second.
It's Tales of the Weird and Strange, and locally, about 30 miles from me is a legend of the Mothman. I'm sure you've all heard about it.
Oh yeah.
And so I wanted to take it and create a sci-fi origin story for it, and a suspenseful, somewhat. Not real. So it's a harbinger of doom. Is he a harbinger of doom? Does he bring doom to the guy that's in the story? Well, I kind of left it to the reader's discretion to make up their mind. And that's the kind of I guess there's lessons to be learned, and that's what I try to impart into any of this horror or the sci-fi aspect of it. It's and then the real cool thing is about 12 or 13 other people. I challenged them to take a local legend and create something horrific out of it, and they did. And this thing, it can be picked up on Amazon or in a lot of it's in a lot of different kind of locations on retail shelves. So it's I'm pretty proud of it, and I'm pretty proud of the people that come together to make it happen too. So it's about 100 pages of just crazy stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Are you talking about the Mothman prophecies, Lawrence?
Huh?
Like what the movie was based off of, the Mothman prophecies?
Yeah.
You're 30 minutes from that?
Yes.
Oh wow.
There's Tales of the Weird and Strange. Was able to pull it up real quick off of Lawrence's Instagram.
I will be getting that too. So cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So cool.
I mean,
man, that's awesome.
Yeah, it is.
All right, hold on just a second, guys.
Very cool. Very cool.
All right. Let's see.
Boom.
Devil's Dominion.
I'm up next.
Yep.
All right. So I was fortunate to be brought on as a writer for Black Box Comics, a concept that was handed to me by the publisher, Demetrius, and so shout out to him. And so what the story is about is a story of Devlin St. Paul, and she has made a deal with the devil to get herself out of something horrific that was happening with her and her brother. And what she ends up doing is reneging on that deal, and so she's been infused with demonic powers, but she now wants to use those demonic powers after reneging on her deal with the devil to help lost souls. So it's really a look at perception of the supernatural, and your role in good, bad, right and wrong, in your choice. So Devil's Dominion is all about choice, and hopefully everyone will be able to kind of see themselves in the character of Devlin, and kind of entertain the idea that we all kind of have some form of demon, something we're dealing with, the issue per se that we have to make a choice about.
Very good. And then you also have, let's see if I got it here. That's a little teaser for some other time. Well, you also have Don't Ever Blink. Yeah. You also don't have Don't Ever Blink, which I apparently didn't import. So tell us a little bit about Don't Ever Blink.
No problem at all. So Don't Ever Blink is a slasher psychological horror that is about a killer that sews the eyelids shut of its victims, and it hinges on a survivor heroine named Tinsley Mercer Grace, who was a victim but survived, obviously, and now she's out trying to find answers to why she survived. And in that process, we learn that the killer, has returned from a previous time where detectives and authorities were never able to actually capture this killer, and so the past links with present, and ultimately the reveal of who the killer is and why she survived happens. And that's a limited 5-issue series that I'm doing with Richard Kemp, who's been amazing. He's my co-creator, my partner, yeah, that's Don't Ever Blink. And slasher psychological horror is my favorite, by the way. So
cool. And you said her name is Tanty Mercer Grace?
No, it's Tinsley Marissa Grace.
Tinsley Marissa Grace. That's like the perfect. That's the perfect final girl name right there.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Harry's not here. His internet kept just crapping out on him, and so he had to get off. But Vacuum Decay 2, Harry is the author of Vacuum Decay 2. I'm pretty sure he's also the artist. And issue 2 just came out. You can read it for free at vacuumdecay.com, or you can order it in print off of there too. Really cool. Vacuum Decay 1 was really cool, and so I'll probably go read Vacuum Decay 2 when we get off this call.
All right.
Did we hit everybody? I think so.
Yeah.
Very good. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being on here tonight. This was our second ever
No
show.
problem.
And it's just been so much fun. I've so enjoyed it. And thank you all. We will try to feel free to go. If I don't get to it, go to all the various social media platforms, link your books in the comments so that people can find them, and give yourselves give your own shout out on there if you get to it before I do. Next week, Tyrone and I are howling at a full moon. Next week is a werewolf night.
Hey, guess which werewolf is Brett?
Which one is which, guys?
Which one's which? We don't know. It was tough.
The red glasses is Brett, and I kind of got this thing that I do on my stories that I think Brett used to design my werewolf, where I have the locks with orange tips. So he
has some orange
tips.
Like,
he had some orange tips to the wolf hair.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yep. So next week is Werewolf Night. We have all sorts of people on that have written werewolf comics, and so they'll be joining us next week. So if you're out there, tune in again next week. If you're listening to this on podcast form, download next week's episode also. Gentlemen, Brian, John, Lawrence, and Ryan, and Harry in absentia, thank you guys so much for being here tonight. Tyr and I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
No
for sure.
problem. Until next time, everybody, we'll see you next Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern on all social media channels. And again, you can also listen to us on most major podcasting platforms. Just search for Broadcast from the Dispatch. We will soon be on all major podcasting platforms, but it just takes a little bit of time to get there. So everybody, we'll see you later.